Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. Hello, everybody. It's Pat DeSerbo. The most fascinating podcast in the world. Has nothing to do with me. Has to do with the people that come on the podcast. Today I have Joe Armentano. Joe is the Chief Executive Officer of Paraco Gas, one of the most highly recognizable and respected brands in the propane industry, with more than 425 employees. They have 28 locations and revenues of over $150 million. Paraco is the largest independent propane marketer in the Northeast. Joe and I have been friends for many years. We met through a friend in common, probably 15 or 20 years ago. And Joe has two children, Christina, his daughter, who works with him, and Christopher, who is in a different business. Joe is engaged to Paula Sarajevo, and thank you for being with us here today, Joe.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate the invitation. Hopefully, I can live up to part of the billing of making it the most interesting podcast in the world, but we give it our best shot.
I think you're going to do great. I'm in the habit of asking people about when they're very young children, and having read your book, and spoken to you so many times, I feel like I know the story, but others don't. What are your earliest memories as a child?
Well, it's interesting. My earliest memories, first of all, being, born in 1954, and which means that officially I'm getting old. But I was the oldest of four boys, and we lived in Mount Vernon, New York, when I first grew up. But my first memory was actually when I was about 5 or 6 years old. We were moving from Mount Vernon temporarily. We went out to Jersey. My father was a salesman for a company called Forney Industries, and he was being relocated. And we were on, and I think I was 5, maybe turning 6. We were on in a truck, moving truck, and I had my father to the left driving, my grandfather to my right, who actually, was a coal miner, came over from Italy, turn of the century. And I was a 5-year-old boy in the middle. And as we're going down the road, we ran out of gas. And just a memory that sticks with me, seeing my father and my grandfather kind of argue about who was going to go get gas. It was probably the first time or maybe the last time I saw somebody telling my father exactly what to do, because my grandfather took charge, and he ended up walking across this field. I have this image of a field, that he was walking to get gas. So that's my earliest memory and it's interesting because it is a family memory. And unfortunately, my grandfather died within about a year of that incident.
That's interesting. How long did you live in Jersey for?
Oh, just about a year. We were,
Okay.
in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and I think that's one of the other rarities. My mother won that battle to move back to Mount Vernon, and we ended up coming back to Mount Vernon and then into Yonkers, New York.
Some dark days living in New Jersey. So did you go to high school in Mount Vernon, or
No, I actually moved from Mount Vernon to Yonkers when I was 11 years old, 12 years old, in sixth grade. Went to school in Yonkers and ended up at Roosevelt High School in Yonkers, New York. One of you talk about how as a child and as a teenager, how life experiences kind of shape you. And I got some really incredible life experiences at Roosevelt High School in Yonkers. Played football for a coach that coached for somewhere about 40 years, and was probably the second most influential mentor in my life, other than my dad. So and just a great kind of high school, very diverse, and played on the chess club, and there were all different kinds of kids, and it just was a real great experience, a high school experience before I went to Fordham University after I graduated in 1976.
Hmm. My dad played high school football at Mount Pleasant in the Schenectady area, and he always used to talk about the teams down in New Rochelle and Yonkers back then. They both had good football programs, apparently.
Yeah, this was interesting because the coach that came aboard really developed an incredible football program, and actually some of the lessons I learned in team lessons, and work ethic lessons really stick with me today in business, but also some of the life lessons of staying healthy, working out, and we did weights and ran, and all those are also are really stuck with me as well in later life. The only problem with football is the body has a memory. So,
Mm,
some of those, that's the only issue with that sport, in my opinion.
agreed. So, what kind of a curriculum did you take in high school?
I was I ended up just taking all different subject matter, and ended up going, when I went to college, I ended up to be a history major. I
Okay.
actually wanted to be in a lawyer. That was my aspirations. I was working for my dad. My dad had me working when I was 12 years old, when he had a little facility in Mount Vernon and then in Yonkers. And again, my youngest business memory is when I was about 5 or 6 or 7 years old. He had a shop on McQuestion Parkway in Yonkers and Mount Vernon, and he had these spiral staircases, and I used to go up those spiral staircases. But he had me, coming in on Saturdays, and when I was a kid, 11, 12 years old, and then during high school, I worked for him during the summer, worked for him sometimes on weekends, but I still did not embrace the family business. I assumed I was going to be a lawyer until after my second year in college, where I saw the opportunity to join the family business. And I said, Dad, I'd like to join when I graduate, and I did.
That's neat. I have this thing I say, and I don't know where I got it or if I made it up, but I call it the dot matrix phenomenon. And it has to do with if you've ever looked at a dot matrix and you've been too close, you can't see it. But then all of a sudden, you're just at the right distance one day and the picture is there. It's like the business came into focus for you. Do you remember, like, was there something about how old you were, or was there an event that
I
made
was
you?
about 19, and
Mhm.
I think I gradually got sucked into the family business by just as I was working in the business. My dad gave me a lot of responsibility for a young man. I drove a truck to begin with. I worked the counter. I helped him in sales. So I kind of felt like I was getting experiences, and I was making money. And I was making money for a young kid as well at that time. But it wasn't like a light bulb went on. It was probably more of a gradual look back as I was going through these experiences, that I said, there's really one hell of an opportunity here to join this business. It was, getting off the ground. My dad had started it in 1968, and now it was getting, close to, 8 years old, and it was going to get to 10 years old. And I really thought I could make a difference. I just felt that I knew the business was going to grow because of my father's entrepreneurial, skill set, and because my father was not adverse to risk. Very interesting because he never graduated from high school. He was an incredible, interesting character, but very much of a visionary, very, very much of a risk taker, very, very much of a salesperson. And he was determined to grow his business. And he had a secret plan of trying to get all four of his boys in his family business.
Hmm. So this is a good time, I think, for me to mention the book. Not everyone's read the book, but it's called One Hell of a Ride. And I read the book twice or three times because I read it as a manuscript. And I know you had a small group of people, or maybe it was a big group of people that read your manuscript. But I'm going to guess that I had as many comments as anyone.
I'm sure you did, Pat. You're not shy, that's for sure.
But I thought it was so good. And for those who haven't read it, I just think it's a great family story. And for those in the New York metropolitan area, they know your family, they know your trucks. I thought it was a great story. What made you decide to write the book?
Well, thanks, Pat. I had actually, when my dad was alive, he passed in 2010, but somewhere in about 2008, I had now been working for my dad full time since 1976. So we had so many different experiences that we had gone through together as father and son, as business partners. Again, my dad, I had a 1 in 1,000 relationship with my dad. I always tell people that. He was obviously my dad. He was my best friend. And then eventually I became his business partner. But, as long as he was alive, he was even though he did a great job with estate planning and gifted stock, he was always going to be in charge. And, he always going to be the chairman of the board until he did pass. But right around 2008, I started to say, Dad, we should capture some of these stories because of his unique personality, and even as a kid. And I hired an intern, a friend of mine's son, to start tape recording my dad, which I did. And then I ended up hiring. Then he passed, and a few years later, I picked it up again. Ended up hiring a ghostwriter. Ghostwriter gave me some information. Did not love the fact she came down and interviewed about 20 people, and I gave her 100 hours of tape. She gave me a manuscript which I absolutely hated, not
Mm.
because it wasn't useful, because it was chronological and it was very helpful and it had all the stories, but it did not have my voice. It did not have my emotion. So I decided I had to become a writer.
Wow.
And becoming a writer is not easy. So
Mm-mm.
I would take the book, I started to rewrite it, and then as time went on, I had to add chapters because things were happening in the business. And then I put it down. I picked the manuscript up. I said, this is pretty good. Put it down. 90 days later, picked it up and said, it's not that good. And then did it again and did it again. And it took me about 14 years to get it from 2008, to be a book. But I'd probably still be writing it today until somebody said you eventually got to put that pen down. And but I was really happy with the outcome of it. I really think it captured my dad well, our relationship well, our business, the family environment. So kind of a combination of a father-son story and a combination of a family business story.
I agree. I loved it. And like I said, I've read it three times, but it's the proverbial long sauce. You just kept cooking it until it was had the right flavor. Um, so everything was not like sunshine and roses along the way, as I read in the book. And you had a lot of interesting stories, but one of them that stands out is was well publicized and was, I imagine, very difficult to get through. Was the fire, the bridge abutment and the fire, the propane explosion. Can you talk about that?
Oh, I certainly can. Again, July 27th, 94, is something I'll never forget as long as I live, is when, I was awakened somewhere about 11 p.m. by my safety director, who basically said that, we have a transport propane truck coming back from New Jersey. It was on 287 and hit a bridge. So when my safety director called me, he said, I'm on my way up to the accident. And I said, please stop. He lived in New Jersey. I said, and this was in Westchester County, right on 287. And I said, come pick me up on the way. He picked me up, and arrived on the scene, you had Red Cross trucks and fire trucks and ambulances, and you had, fires. You had a fire on one side of the highway, and the transport truck actually landed on the other side of the highway. We had to identify our driver who died in the accident. So it was a really horrendous situation where, in a flash, all of this work that my dad did since he started the business in 1968 was going to basically disappear. All of his hard work was going to disappear because the business was really going to be challenged with being able to survive that accident, because about 24 people ended up going to the hospital. You had a bunch of serious burn cases. Thank God no one passed away or died, and everybody eventually recovered. But the human element to that, and how that weighs on you, and as a CEO of the company, and about how, what caused it, how could you have prevented it? And obviously, it took us about 3 years to sort it out, and we ended up, getting through the civil and actually a criminal litigation for hours of service violations, where the company really made a mistake, did not know about drivers that were over hours, but should have known about drivers over hours.
Hmm.
So a lot of lessons learned. It's something that I'm actually very proud of, that how we handled it. Took responsibility and basically overcame that tragedy, and really took a lot of lessons from a safety, a humanity standpoint, a business governance standpoint, and really became a better company because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we've grown 4 times the size since that accident happened in 1994.
Mm-hmm. That was a big one.
It was, for sure. And again, it took up about 2 or 3 chapters in my book, because I thought it was very important to talk about it, and be very honest about it. But it was, like I said, something that I actually today, when I'm go to safety meetings with new employees, first thing I do is bring up the accident. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that because it really puts a spotlight on how important safety is within our organization.
Amen. I thought that writing about it in the book, again, just my opinion, I thought it was really sensitively done and well done. And there's also a lot of misunderstandings. Like people don't know anything about it other than what they read in the paper or someone told them. But it's kind of like folklore locally. In Westchester County, everyone remembers that.
Yeah, it's getting, now we're over 30 years. So, but those memories, people remember it. Grant Avenue overpass in White Plains is what the bridge where it got hit.
Mm-hmm.
Still go over that bridge once in a while. So, it's certainly, it's certainly, a lot of people still do remember that accident.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting story in the book was you bought a location on or locations on Long Island, and you had some interactions with the unions that were challenging for you. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. Again, we probably have, there's 1,000 stories. I couldn't put them all in the book, but I put some of the more important ones. But, what's interesting was, as I said, my dad started in 1968 and out of a garage in Mount Vernon. And then we bought our first propane company called Paraco Fuel Corp in Peekskill in 1979. And when that happened, we started to kind of fall in love with the propane business. It was something that we looked at as our future. And as a sidelight, we've made 55 acquisitions since then in propane. But Suburban Propane, out of Mahwah, New Jersey, had some locations on Long Island they were looking to sell back in 1986, and we were a small company, didn't even have a ability to get financing, and that's a story of it in of itself. And which is in the book, and we ended up making that acquisition in 1986, and we inherited a local union at the time, and it was a tough Teamsters union, but we were not really afraid of union operation because we actually had two union operations to begin with. Our Mount Vernon location was a union operation of Teamsters and different local, and the one in Peekskill was one of Teamsters different local. So my dad had a philosophy. He didn't care if it was union or non-union. Still don't care today. Really care about whether or not people are accountable and give you good day's work. And so we went into the acquisition of Suburban with a really positive approach that we can talk to the union about getting some flexibility within work rules and doing what we needed to do to be able to run that business, because the major reason Suburban sold that business, and the only reason they sold that business, because they were having major union problems. So fast forward, we end up on strike in after we first contract we went through was fine, and after the second one we ended up on strike, and the union was this was a pretty tough Teamsters union. They were associated with a little crime family back then. This was the heyday of the unions back in the 80s and the 70s, and we had about 18 employees, and but we were going to try to get a good contract. We had no thought that we would break that union, that we would basically go non-union, but over time the union gave us no choice, and we ended up. And I give my brother Robert, my second, my brother after me, a tremendous amount of credit for help staying in there and really basically managing that union operation. He ended up, and we went on strike right after Labor Day, and a surprise strike. Didn't even know, and vandalism to our trucks, and so he ended up with replacement workers, and really, as a family, we kind of gutted it out, and eventually decertified that union about a year later. And ironically, some of the union men that were there ended up coming back to work for us. About 2 or 3 years later, one of them just retired, and it's again one of the bigger events in our company's history.
That's fascinating. I hope it didn't mess up any barbecues in September.
No, we were okay. The really key to our ability to handle the strike was our ability to get management and other people to basically make deliveries,
Mm-hmm.
and to go out and again in life you find out that you make choices. You don't, whether it's a union or whether it's an employer or an employee or a vendor or whatever, you don't, or a customer, you want to treat people fairly. You don't want to be, and you don't want to get intimidated or intimidate people. So, that situation was really one of intimidation, and we were able to withstand it, and it was a really interesting experience, but one I do not want to do again, by the way.
You're a lover, not a fighter.
At least today now.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about fighting, and let's talk about fairness, because I've been struck by you over the years being the sort of the leader of this group of four boys in your family. And although it wasn't congruent with everyone, sometimes it's just not a fit, and there has to be a leader, and you're the leader. But in my opinion, just watching you over the years, and no one else is here to talk about it except you and I, if we had Rob on, your other brothers, they might have a different viewpoint. But I feel like you are kind and firm, and like I've never heard you denigrate your brothers, even though there's been some litigation and this and that over the years. Can you talk a little bit about how you grew the business, how people's sort of views of the future diverged, and why it was necessary for people to kind of graduate from the business? And eventually how you bought everyone out?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. But first of all, family businesses are not easy.
Mm.
Anybody who's going to listen to this podcast that's in a family business will understand the emotion that goes into it, the challenges that go into a family business, and obviously the opportunities that come into a family business. So you got to weigh those opportunities and challenges. So as I said, my dad had this dream of having all four boys in his business, and sometimes be careful for what you ask for because you may actually get it. And I'm not so sure all four boys were really destined to be in his family business. Just like today, I have a daughter in the business and a son who right now is not destined to be in the business, though I'd love him to come in the business because of, people are different. So, as my dad got every one of his sons in the business, the good news was for a period of time, we started to grow where we started to get to the point where nobody was stepping on each other. We tried to, get people within different responsibilities. And my dad made a decision early on to make me the CEO, probably about 1988. So that was the first decision he made, and he had to tell his other three, sons that I was going to be in charge, again in case when he died, and I had, a little more voting stock, and so he did what I thought was really the number one thing you have to do in a family business, especially when you have multiple children or cousins or whatever it may be, and you have to have succession. You need to have a succession plan. And he had his succession plan relatively early. So, and when he put his succession plan in, it really made, or it basically got one of my brothers to look in the mirror and say, it's time for me to move on. So my second brother, Rob, decided to leave the business after being in it for about 10 years. He went into not a competitive business, a related business, and, but he still maintained stock within that company, when he left. So now there were three sons in the business somewhere in the early 2000s, 2002, 2004.
Can I stop you
And
for a second?
yep,
But Rob was still a shareholder.
he was still a shareholder. He
Okay.
was still a shareholder. He was a non-voting shareholder, but he
Hmm.
was a shareholder. So there was language in the buy. My dad did buy-sell agreements. He did all the things necessary to have an orderly succession. And one of the things in the buy-sell agreements is if you sold your stock, you'd have to get rid of your voting shares. You can maintain your non-voting shares. So he was still a shareholder. Company being a C corporation, basically never paid dividends. So he was a non-paid shareholder for many, many years. But the good news was the company was continuing to grow in value and in equity value. And and then my third brother, my brother Mike, he ran into a little problem with the family business when we sold our industrial gas business. And after we sold our industrial gas business, he really didn't have a place, so to say, in the propane business, and he decided to. And I give Mike a lot of credit. He had come right out of high school and really, hardworking, very kind brother, very responsible. But again, one of my brothers that probably should have not gone into that family business, certainly right out of high school, and he went back to college, and the company paid for his college education, and then after that, he went to become a holistic doctor. So during this transition, we helped him become a holistic doctor, and he left the business, somewhere about 20 years ago, and
Is he
he
still
basically,
practicing?
he only practiced for about 5 or 6 years,
Hmm.
and then he ended up in after my dad sold his stock in 2010. After my dad died in 2010, he sold his stock shortly thereafter.
Mhm.
He avoided litigation. One of my brother Rob was trying to convince him to kind of litigate, which my brother Rob did litigate over my dad's will, et cetera, and so on. But my brother Mike decided to cash in, and I talked to my brother Mike probably, 2, 3 days a week. Amazingly, how him not being in the family business incredibly improved our personal relationship. He moved out to Arizona, and he's kind of been retired. God, probably for close to 10 years now, and he's in his mid 60s. So he's doing really well. He's enjoying life, and so then now we're down to still one family member, my younger brother John, in the business, and then my other brother outside of the business, Rob. And a lot of stories on how we got there, but eventually ended up in litigation, and ended up buying my brothers out in 2021. And now the business is really within my family. I've done my estate planning, so my son and my daughter have stock in the business, and finally solved the problem that my dad couldn't solve, because he was trying to get my brother while he was alive to sell his stock, but it just too much emotion, I think, involved in it, and it took some litigation to get that done, and get both of my brothers to sell their stock, and got a lot of money. They made a lot of money, and they don't have to worry about working. And now the business with it is within my family at this point.
And how's your relationship with Rob and John at this point?
Not really that good. There's no doubt that's one of the tragedies of a family business. I think it can certainly hurt your personal relationship, and it certainly hurt ours. Because, as you said before, I'm sitting here talking about my perspective, my experience, what I see as, what I think was fair or what not was fair, and everybody has different perspectives. That's what makes the world go round. And sometimes you look at people's justification and you shake your head, but everybody has their own opinions and their own viewpoints, and they're entitled to them.
Hmm. So how did you and Paula meet?
Very interesting. I was married for, I have a lot of um, probably experiences in my life, and we talked about the accident in '94 and living through that. I've been through some major acquisitions, litigation with my brothers, but the toughest decision I made by far in my life, not even a close second, was when I decided to get divorced after 35 years of marriage, and just had a marriage that, unfortunately, as you see, you got a 50-50 shot in this world of staying married as far as the divorce rate is concerned. And in my case, I just, our marriage just did not work after a period of time. So, when I got divorced, I started to, I went to my doctor. He gave me the best lesson. He said, don't make any major decisions for at least 6 months. I lost 10 pounds. My stomach was churning. I had acid in my stomach all the time. Just really could not function well. It was
Mm.
just it was a tough, very, very tough decision. It was one I knew I had to make, but one that, as I always say, was probably the most selfish decision I've made in my life, because, I was really thinking about myself, and, about how I was going to live, but didn't know what was going to happen, didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew I needed to get out of the house, and I did, and took about 3 years to get divorced, and probably within about maybe 6, 8 months of me separating, I met Paula through through my banking relationship at that time with People's Bank. She was running a branch, and she called my assistant, Diane, who, Diane, she's still
Mm-hmm.
working for me today. I think she's got about 35 years with our company now, and asked if I would be willing to basically give a talk at her branch. She used to use that to get new clients, and she invited about. She ended up moving it from the branch to a restaurant because we ended up with 70 people, and
Mm.
I gave a talk called the Paraco Gas Story: 10 Lessons Learned, and that
Mm.
and that was in 2014, beginning of 2014. So again, 10 years, and that was that podcast or that talk. Not only was helped me meet Paula, because after that I took her out, and I found out she was divorced. Had been divorced for a period of time, and we started dating. But that was also the emphasis for me to rewrite my book, to go back to the book again. So I got a
Mm.
twofer out of that breakfast,
Mm.
and started to really go back and do my book as well. And Paula and I, been probably over the last 10 years, I've had an incredible, great quality of life, and I learned a lot about myself. Tried to uh, make myself a better human being in a lot of ways. Learned from my past mistakes in my relationship with my ex-wife, and also really discovered that there was more to life than business, and started to really focus in on my work-life balance. I've been since these last 10 years, we've been on hundreds of trips, and I use the word hundreds of trips. Italy and Portugal and Spain, and yeah, I mean, and France and Amsterdam, and all over the United States, and 14 Caribbean islands, and we've been, just been getting a great work-life balance, and believe it or not, not great, not only good for you on your personal side, but really has helped me in my business side as well.
Mm. How so?
It just makes you focus on what's real important.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at getting away from the mundane day, into the weeds where you shouldn't be anyway. I have a saying I'm trying to teach my daughter and my team is you got to spend time working on the business, not working in the business.
Mm-hmm.
So, today I probably work in the business probably about 12 to 20 hours a week. I probably still work on the business 60 to 80 hours a week because I'm still
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the business, thinking about things that we need to do from a strategic standpoint, things that can move the needle, things that are important, and getting away from that day-to-day minutia that basically bogs you down from being a businessman and an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're busy making the donuts, you can't be thinking about expanding the empire.
And no doubt, if somebody says to me, I don't have time, I know they're working too much in the business and not enough on, and they're not
Mm-hmm.
they're not understanding how important it is to delegate, how important it is to build a team. I happen to be very, very lucky here.
Mm-hmm.
And our company now we're really up to 500 employees today, and
Mm-hmm.
I have some incredible, good team members, and just have a great management team that we give them responsibility, and they do a great job.
Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, you got, I don't know, what's another 20 years of work, you figure?
Well, I don't think I got 20. Believe it or not, this I don't think I'm getting up there. I'm going to be 70 years old in December. I don't feel it. I'm still playing tennis. I'm still getting my 10,000 steps in. I'm still doing everything I need to do like I was 50 years old. But there does become a little different mindset. as you get, older. So, whether or not this continues to go for a third generation, will be interesting to see how that plays out. But I certainly will be around for another 5 or 6 years, I believe. I still think I still have the energy, and I still have the passion. And I feel real good about being able to meet the challenges that every business has.
So without going into detail, I guess about your pro forma, where do you see yourself in 5 years? If you think in terms of the growth plan, what's on the menu?
Well, listen, as I said before, we've made about 55 acquisitions, and we're right now, most of our business is the propane business. We have 110,000 customers. We service we service the entire metropolitan New York area, the Hudson Valley, the Long Island, 29 plant locations, and we do barbecues for Barbecue Exchange for the grill cylinders. We do residential heating and commercial heating, cooking. We do forklift gas. We do pool heat. So our kind of claim to fame as a company is our ability to keep busy most year round. We're not like your traditional propane company that you find upstate New York, where it's basically a heating season that they're dependent on. So despite the fact that, we've had a little global warming here, and, we have warmer winters, we've been able to do well because of of the diversity of our business segments.
Mm.
So I think we continue down that road of trying to grow our core business, our propane business. But I'd also like to consider getting into residential services. We do some work right now in residential services. We do some HVAC work, so we're looking at HVAC companies to potentially purchase, maybe companies that service generators, because I firmly believe that propane is going to be, even though it is a fossil fuel, it's a clean burning fossil fuel. It's been labeled under the federal Clean Air Act as clean burning, and despite some of this being lumped with other fossil fuels, it's an excellent bridge to the renewable future. So I do see this business, backing up the electric grid and doing a lot of things that a portable energy source like propane can only do, because that's its claim to fame: clean and portable. And that those two characteristics, I think, will continue to make it a very important niche energy source, both in New York and the Northeast, and in the United States.
So when you're thinking about your career at this point, and you look back at your life, I like to say that the most important punctuation for all of us is the hyphen. And the hyphen is what's between our date of birth and our date of death. What would you want people to know about you?
Oh boy. I like them, I like people to know that I believe in that every business should be given back to the communities they serve. So that's a big thing, I think, for us as a company, that I feel very, very fortunate in my life to have opportunities many people have not had. With my dad and getting an opportunity in a family business. So I think understanding that, staying humble, understanding you have to give back to society as a whole, and I'd like to feel that I'm generous in that nature. Um, I'd like to really, again, be able to say that I've been the same kind of mentor for my kids that my father was for me, that I've been a role model, that I've been somebody that has has got the values that are what I cherish, and hopefully I imparted on my family members. And also, it's interesting. We've had a lot of employees, through the years, work for us. Some for 35 or 40 years, and some for 1 or 2 years. And, I really, I've had so many of past employees come up to me and talk about their experience here, and how they've really been able to take that experience and use it in other careers, or really, really uh, get some value out of working at Paraco. So I really do believe that, that's important to me. We really are, as a family business, we got families that depend on us, and we have employees, and, that depend on us. And, I tell every one of my employees, listen, if you're not happy, here, number one thing we need to do is try to make you happy, maybe get you into another job, have you do something different. And especially if you're a good worker, and, but if it's really not the right fit for you, then, you should take the opportunity to move on, and let us help you do that. So, I really do believe that, employees have choices just like employers. And, if I can help employees, or, people that work for me, and any way, I always feel that is something that, I want to be part of my legacy, because, I want that as also as something that I can be very proud of, that, we've helped people along their career paths, wherever that leads to, whether it's a Paraco for until retirement, or whether it's Paraco for 2 or 3 years.
Hmm. I like that. Like if I want to work hard and you'll help me find something in your organization, let's do that. But don't try to make me into a good employee if I'm not a good one, and maybe
Yeah, yeah,
help
and
me.
you may be a good employee, Pat, but maybe not the right fit for our
Right,
organization.
right.
Because again, everybody's got different skills and different passions, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not a one fits all. And quite frankly, I do think, if companies are, especially today's today, and I think today's workforce, and today's, generational workers, I think companies have to give, employees opportunities to move on to other areas within their company, as if they were getting a new job, even outside of the company, because it gives them experiences. If you're in a
Mm-hmm.
job, the same job over and over again for 40, 50 years, that may suit a certain amount of the employee base, but it's only a small amount. I think people do want different experiences, and they want to continue to feel like they're personally growing, and they're personally basically, making a difference.
Well, I could ask you questions all day, but I know you have another meeting. Is there anything you might like to ask me or say before we wrap up today?
No, Pat, I just think, again, from the standpoint of my life experiences, and being, to the point where, as you get to be my age, you get a little bit more reflective. You know, the one thing that I'd love to impart on any person that may be listening to your podcast, that may be working for a company or doing something within a career. I'm a big believer in, entrepreneurship. I believe that, people should be able to, go out, and, if they really want to be their own boss and want to start their own company, should really take that risk and that gamble. A good friend of mine, who was looking to start his own business, went up to my father one day and said, Pat, I'm looking to start my own business, and, you know, uh, I'm not so sure I should. I'm kind of a little concerned. So my father said to him, he said, Brian, assume you go into your own business and you fail. you going to be able to get a job? And Brian said, yeah, I'm going to be able to get a job. You're going to be able to get a good job? I'm going to be able to get a good job. So what are you really risking? What's your real risk? So, that is the message that, if there's anything that I really have a soft spot for, because again, we're now 500 employees, but I can remember like yesterday when we were 3 employees, and then 10 employees, and then 50, and then 100, and then 200. So I remember it like yesterday, and I really encourage people to really take that risk to start their own business if they feel that that's something that they want to do, if it's in their passion to do it. Don't let don't let I don't have money, or I can't, I may lose a job. I'm going to lose a good job. Don't let that get in the way of taking that risk.
I love to hear you say that. Again, my opinion's irrelevant in this, but my first boss, I was a college intern, and my first boss, when he met me, I was waiting on tables. And he said, you can't wait on tables and do this as well. And he says, the good news is if you fail at this career, you can probably get your old job back.
Right. Exactly.
And
And
this the joy of entrepreneurship and what you've done in your life, and that systematic, just every morning you get up and you say, okay, how am I going to integrate into my growth plan today? How can I be strategic? Work on the business, as you like to say.
yeah, but it is a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that it's more than a job.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have to also, if you're going to make that leap, there's nothing today, even with today's technology and all the, stuff that you can learn, in the old days, the kids in school, these were the smart kids. Today, you could be smart in about 10 seconds. You pick up your phone and you basically look on Safari and you find out something. So, knowledge is very easy to attain, technology, et cetera, and so on. But even in today's world, nothing beats work ethic. Especially if you're going to start your own business, you got to be willing to put in the hours, and you got to be willing to make the sacrifices, because there are sacrifices to make, and there are personal sacrifices that come along with starting your own business. So that's the one thing that you got to be willing to do, in my opinion, to be successful.
Mm. Well, on that note, thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate you having me on the podcast. And as I always say at the end of my conversations, keep smiling, and hope to catch up with you soon.
All righty. Thank you, sir. If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.